Last time we had stopped at here at the kind of knowledge and poetic inspirations. The kind of knowledge that poetic inspiration brings is essentially individual in its character. It is figurative, vague, and indefinite. So we had a bit of discussion about epistemological and social character of poetry and how it can, how it is, according to Iqbal here, how it is, different from religion and philosophy. Now he's moving to religion. So, religion in its more advanced forms. And we also talked a bit about this. By more advanced form means religions which have developed systems, especially I think scholastic systems. What Habermas would call rationalization. So in religion you have a higher stages of rationalization, I guess. That's the claim anyway. Religion in its more advanced forms rises higher than rises higher than poetry. Now, I have talked a bit about Iqbal's use of term religion here, and I'm at the moment going with him, and the term religion is problematic to say the least, and it is problematic for Iqbal as well, as we can see from his poetry. And when we talk about religion, what we talk about is metaphysics, basically, or metaphysical aspects of what is generally known as religion. Islamic term is more to do with deen. So in Urdu, for example, for Urdu and Persian, for example, for religion, we use the term mazhab. But mazhab, as in Arabic, and also in Urdu, more specialized uses in more specialized uses in Urdu and Persian. Mazhab really means school of thought. So we talk about madhahib Islamiyya, meaning different Muslim schools of thought, in like fiqh, for example, jurisprudence. So that has nothing to do with the English word religion. And ad-din doesn't really translate fully to English word religion, because ad-din is religion in what at least partially known as religion in English, and a system of life. And in Arabic words has political connotations as well, because dana yadina, to accept somebody's sovereignty or somebody's dominion, etc. Political and social, I guess. That's the one thing. So I'm sort of not trying not to go into these details at the moment. Just take a lot of things at face value, which we would have to look at later. And the second thing is a lot of things about religion in modern Europe, modern thought, especially European thought in this context, Western thought in this context, is religion is basically the conception of religion, or the concept of religion is basically come from Protestant And as you know, even though Descartes was is known as the founder of modern philosophy, and he comes from Catholic France, but that's an exception to the rule. Really, modern philosophy and modern civilization as a whole developed out of Protestant Europe. Protestant Europe and Protestant England, first of all. And especially philosophy from Protestant Germany, really. So a lot of terms in philosophy, when we use in philosophy, really has kept a lot of its Protestant connotation. So religion is really, in its modern usage, religion is a very Protestant term. Doesn't even cover Catholic. So basically, it was invented by Protestants, in a sense in which we use the word invention in this context, like Kant has. It's like saying Kant had invented the idea of autonomy in its modern moral sense. In a similar way, the Protestants really invented the word or modern concept of religion, basically to destroy medieval Christian civilization, basically, fundamentally. That's one thing. So in philosophy, even though I try to transcend Protestantism, obviously, but it does retain its Protestant bias in its use of its term. You will see the same true with a lot of terms like faith, which we come across. So I wanted to just allude to that. So religion in its more advanced form. So when he's talking about religion in its more advanced form, last time I said basically talking about Christianity and Islam. And advanced form, I mean, it's a value judgment, so what would you... But if try to, to a more neutral interpretation of it, you will say more complex. So complexity itself is neither good or bad. I mean, it's not if you look at complexity as just a factual thing. So you're talking about religions in advanced form, meaning complex religion, the religions which have developed metaphysical systems, scholastic theologies, and reinterpreted their ideas according to, for example, Greek and Roman philosophical systems, etc. So religion in its advanced form religion in its more advanced forms rises higher than poetry. Rises higher than poetry in both senses in which we looked at poetry last time, epistemologically, so it's more objective, more precise, I guess, than poetry, and more social. It talks not just about individual salvation, but how to live a social life, political life, etc. It moves from individual to society. That's where, in its attitude towards the ultimate reality, it is opposed to the limitation of man. I think we did a bit about that. It is opposed to the limitation of man. It is opposed to limitations of man in the sense that, not that it denies the limitations of man, but I say that despite its limitation, human beings can have access to reality, can reach the ultimate reality, the truth. Philosophy would say without the guidance from heavens, but religion would say with guidance from heaven. And then within religion, especially theology and ilm al-kalam, there is a long debate about whether, it's possible to achieve guidance through natural reasons. That's the debate in Christian theology. Not starting, but in one of its most advanced form, you will find in Thomas Aquinas. On the other hand, in Ilm al-Kalam, you will find it especially in the context of what they call at-taqbih, at-tahsin wa at-taqbih al-aqli, the debate in Ilm al-Kalam as well as Usul al-Fiqh. So it enlarges its claim and holds out the prospect of nothing less than a direct vision of reality. So knowing what's the origin of universe, what's our purpose in it, where it is going, what would be the outcome, what lies behind the appearances, etc., etc. Is it then possible to apply the purely rational method of philosophy to religion? Purely rational methods of philosophy to religion. Is it then possible to apply the purely rational method of philosophy to religion? Since religion deals with those questions in a similar fashion as philosophy, the questions which we discussed above in terms of the general character of universe and in terms of the knowledge of ultimate reality. And what does he possible? So I think when he's using is knowledge possible, or he's talking about possibility in a semi-technical term, because rational philosophical methods, is it rational methods of philosophy can be applied to religion. Now we do know that both in Christianity and Islam you have developed, in Christianity you have theology, in Islam you have Ilm al-Kalam. So he can't possibly be talking about possibility in literal sense, because obviously it's not only possible, but it's actually happened and has happened again and again in the history of both Christianity and Islam. So when he talks about is it then possible to apply the purely rational method of philosophy to religion, he's just raising this question, I think, in two ways. In more Kantian terms, is knowledge possible? Obviously, Kant wasn't saying that do we have knowledge, but he was raising a different question. So he is raising a different question of the possibility of rational methods being applied to religion in the context of modern philosophy. I guess where modern philosophy reignite the whole debate about freedom of thought. And whether that absolute freedom of thought makes rational religious reflections a passe, because a theologian or a mutakallim, the whole debate about how can you do a philosophy, how can you be for a Christian theologian or a Muslim mutakallim, how can they do philosophy while they are Muslim, or they are bound by Christian precepts because they are bound by, limited by that, and modern philosophical enterprise is supposed to be, free enterprise, even beyond what it was in Plato and Aristotle. So he's talking about possibility of this in this context, the context of modern philosophy and the role, and that would be a bit more apparent in the following sentences. So is it then possible to apply the purely rational method of philosophy to religion? So it's itself a question whether rational methods, philosophy, modern philosophy, is actually purely rational method. I mean, it does claim that, maybe. So we should differentiate between the claim of modern philosophy and its reality. And at least we shouldn't readily accept the claim that philosophy is purely rational or it is a free inquiry. Now the next, is then possible to apply the purely rational method of philosophy to religion? The spirit of philosophy is one of free inquiry. It suspects all authority. Its function is to trace the uncritical assumptions of human thought to their hiding places, and in this pursuit it may finally end in denial or frank admission of the incapacity of pure reason to reach the ultimate reality. So how he does describe philosophy is, it seems to, what he seems to be saying about philosophy is, actually you can't have a better definition of modern philosophy, at least in its early forms, Cartesian and Kant and Descartes and after him Kant, especially Kant, they were writing. So he seemed to be accepting that at face value at the moment anyway. The spirit of philosophy is one of free inquiry. So that's the first thing, freedom. So in Descartes you see that this start with this freedom is manifested in two things. First is in his method anyway, so rejection of what comes before. So Aristotelian Catholic methods, which he had learned from his teachers, he rejects them, at least bracket them for time being. And then what he does, start from absolute beginning. So that's one manifestation of this freedom, free inquiry. And number three, he relies solely on his own subjective, in the sense that subject his own individual reason, not subjective in a more specific sense, but his own reason. So free inquiry in Descartes, we see this freedom is manifested in that, and in Kant, obviously Kant, you have more developed version of that, and in Kant, autonomy of reason is very important, and the freedom manifests itself in autonomy of reason. And that autonomy of reason lies behind all his three critique, whether it is critique of pure reason, or critique of practical reason, or critique of judgment. So that's the claim of modern philosophy as a free inquiry. So freedom of philosophy, freedom of free inquiry. So, but can a person, if let's accept this claim, and then the question is whether can a religious person or a theologian or a mutakallim do philosophy while remaining as a Muslim or Christian. That's a big debate which has been reignited by these. You'll find Christian philosophers discussing that, but you will also find in Heidegger, who came from a Catholic background, he raises this question, and he answers that question in negative, actually. So Iqbal is raising the same question. The spirit of philosophy is one of free inquiry. So in that sense, can philosophical methods be applied to religion? Can we have a philosophical inquiry within religious culture and civilization, etc.? And in the next sentence, he says that it suspects all authority, that is philosophy. That's another claim of modern philosophy. And that claim is a claim which is the consequence or just the extension of the claim to free inquiry, because as we saw in Descartes, he rejects the Aristotelian methods of his teacher or universities in which he was actually taught. So an absolute beginning. So that's the rejection of authority and just incarnate reliance on reason and reason alone, autonomy of reason. That's the rejection of all authority. What did he say? It suspects all authority. So and when we talk about freedom, we always talk about freedom in negative freedom and positive freedom. And negative freedom is rejection of anything which is not coming from reason itself, and then positively build our system based on reason and reason alone. And in the context of religion, when we talk about authority, we are talking about authority of the text, sacred text, authority of the scholars, authority of prophets, authority of God ultimately. And that authority is questioned by modern thought through the concept of freedom, through the concept of reason, through the concept of autonomy of reason. And Kant, even those philosophers who don't reject religion as a concept, for example Kant, but they have a concept of autonomy of reason, so they will call it immaturity, in the sense that when you take for granted other authorities like God or prophets or scholars or text, so that's against the whole notion of autonomy in Kant, for example. So can a mutakallim or can our religion or within religious culture can we apply rational methods philosophically when religion is based on authority while philosophy is based on denial of those authorities? And the last thing where he says that it suspects all of the function that the function of philosophy is to trace the uncritical assumptions of human thought, to lay bare so that philosophy as a critique, not just in the content side, then both and negatively, to at least bracket all given assumptions, all received assumptions, or deny them, or at least bracket them, and then build everything based on autonomy of reason. So, so the critical aspects of modern philosophy is to lay bare our taken for granted opinion, assumptions, and then reject them or suspect them and build everything anew. That was part of Descartes' project as well. So that's another claim of uncritical assumptions of human thought to the hiding. And in his purpose, it may finally end in denial. Or so philosophy, since it doesn't take anything for granted, so philosophy might say that, we can know the ultimate reality. Like it is in Hegel, for example, famously. Or it might say that there's the ultimate reality, but we don't have access to it, at least not in a straightforward way. That would be Kant, for example. So since philosophy doesn't have any anything, permanent in that sense, it can either deny that what religion says, that ultimate reality, we can have a knowledge of ultimate reality, or it might deny it, or it might accept it. And even if it accepts it, its reality might be different, as Hegel's is from religion, or Marx, for example, or other system, or modern scientific systems, etc. So the question then, so that's the nature of philosophy. Is it then possible to apply the purely rational method of this philosophy, the modern philosophy, which is based on a notion of free inquiry, notion of freedom, which suspects all authority, which try to base its function on critical laying bare of taking for granted assumptions? Can this be compatible with religion? Can we have a culture when we have this free? Obviously, these are claims of philosophy, and freedom is a claim. How much freedom is it? And every freedom, institutes its own limitations, and it might suspect all authority, but it also might create authority. Every as Gadamer would tell us, for example, later. So, but that's still in the future. So at this stage, he's taking for granted modern philosophies claim to be free inquiries, claim to be inquiry which suspects all authorities, and its critical function, or its claim to its critical function, and Iqbal is taking it for granted. Accepting it at face value, and raising the question whether we can have a religious, we can apply a rational method of this philosophy to religion, which obviously assumes authority, etc. And he will. This book is basically, in part, answer to his provisional answer to this question with respect to Islam. Okay, so I think I should have stopped here, and we'll pick up from here.